Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. Who's the point guard? Does it matter? We're doing a Phoenix Suns preview for the upcoming season for fantasy basketball. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. It's the Phoenix Suns. You'll notice that I'm doing these team previews in alphabetical order, and I've skipped three teams. The Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers, and, well, I haven't skipped this one yet, but I'm going to, and that's the Portland Trail Blazers. And I was debating whether we skip this one as well, because there was that rumor about DeAndre Ayton being involved in a move. But put my balls out on the table, and we're going ahead with talking about this Suns preview, because I'm not as sure of that. And we'll see. I've got to get these done by the end of the week, so I can't just keep pushing everyone down to the end. So that is what we're going with for Phoenix today. We'll see. I'm just going to quickly check while I'm talking. Nothing worse than starting a podcast and then 10 minutes into it, you hear that something's actually gone down. No, we're good now. So we're going to go ahead and talk Phoenix Suns. Just a quick little message about the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl first. Warning.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right, get your entries in for the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. As I said, we filled out all of the same amount of spots as last season for categories already, but there's still heaps left. We've got 300 plus that haven't been decided yet, and they will be decided by the end of this week. And points leagues, we've got about 150 or so. So if you want in, it's $50, 40 games max a week. Big payouts at the end. Points leagues is probably looking at 3,000 plus for first, and prizes for second and third, plus $200 to everyone who makes it through to the final round. So top two teams. So there's going to be 60 teams get paid out in the points league, probably 120 get paid out in the category league. So lots of payouts happening there. Slow drafts, deep rosters, 18-man rosters. I think you're going to enjoy it. We've made things so it's the Fantrax app works a little bit smoother. We tried to run 360 teams in one league last season, and it slowed things down. We've pushed that right back now, so it should be able to handle it without too many of those delays that became a problem last season. Let's talk about this Phoenix Suns team. It's what we need to do, and let's do it right now, because they are a very interesting team and one that is rife with questions. Let's start by looking at their schedule. The most quality games in the entire NBA. The NBA thinks that people want to see them, so they're putting them on the national TV days. 55 out of 82 games are on low volume days. That means that they are barely playing on those Wednesday, Fridays, which means whichever Suns player you draft, that helps, because it means that you free up an open, active roster spot on the higher volume days more often than not. This is a huge advantage when you consider Charlotte has 39. It's a 16-game difference. That's really big. Now, the back-to-back differences, it's 1 or 2 games. 16 is a big difference. Speaking of back-to-backs, they have 14, which puts them right in the middle of the pack. And in terms of maximum game weeks, they have 13. That's on the low side as well. That just means they don't have any of those 2-game weeks, really. And they're looking all right. Their playoff schedule's mid to below mid. 3-4-3 for a 24th of March finish. A 4-3-3 for a 31st of March, a 3-3-4 for a 7th of April, which is Yahoo default, and a 3-4-4 for the 14th of April, which is ESPN default. So the playoff scheduling there is not particularly strong. What are the pressure points? Well, it's very easy here. Who the hell starts? There's one spot, it's glaring, it's gaping. Who fits into that hole? Because I don't know. And there's probably 6 blokes, and maybe that's an exaggeration. It could be anyone. It could be Josh Okogie. It could be Eric Gordon, and I don't think it will be, but I do think that Eric Gordon will close games. It could be Keita Bates-Diop. It could be Yuta Watanabe. It could legitimately be, and I think it would be a mistake, but it could be Bol Bol. Could it be Damian Lee? Probably not. Could it be second-round pick Tumani Kamara? Probably not, but who knows? I just don't know what they're going to do. I would say that it's really close between Bates-Diop and Okogie at this stage. I would start Bates-Diop, but I can understand putting Okogie out there. They also have no point guard, and I love it. I love what they're doing. They're eschewing traditional positional designations. And while you might think, we're going to put Bradley Beal under the lens later on. We might look at, Shams said that Beal's going to be the point guard. Every single Suns person that I've spoken to or heard speak about it says that Devin Booker's going to be the primary playmaker, and I'm choosing to believe that. But that is something to watch. And then, do they even play a single point guard at all? Like Jordan Goodwin, who's an interesting player. Does he even play? Is he in the rotation? Or do they just run Beal, Booker, Eric Gordon, and stagger those three for ball handling? And then when someone gets hurt, Goodwin moves in. I think Goodwin probably will play every night, but this is stuff that we just don't really see. And they've also got a new coach because they fired Monty Williams. So Frank Vogel is in. We've seen Frank Vogel have real success defensively. Does he do anything to change DeAndre Ayton? Does DeAndre Ayton even play on this team? Can Vogel be creative offensively? Because he has struggled with that in the past. He can be creative defensively, and they're going to need that help. Or does he just let the guys on offense just figure it out? There's so much there, and we have seen these big threes form together. Of course, I'm talking about Booker, Durant, and Beal here. And someone usually loses out. Can Vogel mitigate that and make everyone lose a little bit? 5% instead of two guys losing 2% and one guy losing 15%? I don't know. Because I know who's losing the 15 if that's the way it goes. It's Beal. I'm going to put him under the lens in a second. But there are still tons of questions about how Vogel handles the ball handling stuff. The fifth starter, which could just rotate every game or every second game or whatever, Thunder style, and how Vogel runs that offense. Because they need to take more threes. They struggled with that last season. They should be able to do it, but was that a Williams thing? Was that just a player personnel thing? I don't know. There are just a lot of question marks about this team, and that's what makes them one of the most intriguing teams to watch for this upcoming season. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's never been a better time. You can go in there and check the Super Bowl winner odds and check about the Miami Dolphins, who should be #1. And I just realized that we just smashed the Broncos, and Jalen Waddle was out. And we still did that. 10 touchdowns. Yeah, we're flying. What about Tua for MVP? What about money line options for week 4? What about the spreads, the totals, the player props? It's all there on FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. What do I mean by breakout candidates? I think you know by now. I hope you know by now. It's just guys that I think are going to have a chance to exceed their projection. I was tempted to put Booker and Beal in there. I've got Booker as like a mid-second round player and Beal as like a 4th to 5th round guy. And there is a chance that, I do truly believe that there is a chance, do not draft him there is a chance that Devin Booker becomes a first round player. And the way that he does that is not losing much in terms of usage and scoring, but becomes a 7.5 to 8 assist player. It's a long shot, but it's possible. But I'm not going to put him there. I'm going to put 2 players there. Keita Bates-Diop and Bol Bol. At the moment, I don't know who's going to start. I've sort of hedged it a little bit with Bates-Diop and Okogie in terms of their minutes, but Keita was very good down the stretch. I think he can defend 3s and 4s. Okogie's probably more of a 2s and 3s guy. Bates-Diop has better shooting potential and shooting ability, even though Okogie had some stretches last season. And he's just got the size that I think would be very interesting for this team. And if he does lock in and play 31 minutes a night, he could very easily jump, probably more into 16 or 14 team league discussion, but much higher than where I've got him projected. And the other one is Bol, who we have seen put up fantasy value before. We also have to remember that the time that he did that, there were 7 regular rotation players out in Orlando. And as soon as they came back, he was gone because there is almost no better definition of highlight reel bias than Bol. People love someone that looks funny. Let's just say funny. Oh man, look at him. Look how long his arms are. He is so skinny. What is he doing? How did he block that? Look at him go. He's shooting. Oh my God, the big tall man did a big shot. People love that sort of stuff. But they don't see the lowlights of when he misses every single defensive rotation, or he doesn't hit the right pass, or he shot 28% from 3 last season. But in saying all of that, what if the Suns decide that he's the starter and he starts between Ayton and Durant and he's out there blocking 3-pointers, which he can, and somehow he does learn how to play within a team scheme and he doesn't become one of the most lazy defenders you've ever seen? That is all possible. Like, Josh Okogie might start and play 30 minutes and I would have no interest in him for fantasy at all. But if Bol did that and played 30, I'm not here to deny that he can put up big numbers. He very easily can. It leads to losing basketball all through his NBA career, and that's why he doesn't get to play. But maybe a light switch flips. I don't think it will, but maybe it does. Let's go to one of their other additions, and let's put Bradley Beal under the lens. It's really going to be an interesting one here for Beal, and in doing some research for this segment, I found some stuff that I didn't even know. Like, I don't know how I didn't know it, but I didn't know it. Let's just look at what Beal did last season first. He played only 50 games with a fake injury towards the end of the season. He didn't play after the 21st of March. Pretty standard stuff for teams to sit those guys the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season. But he played 33 and a half minutes. He averaged 23 points with almost 2 threes, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.7 blocks, which is actually a really good number, 0.7 blocks. But I think we've got this impression, and I've heard it a number of times, and I've probably even bought into it. Oh, Beal's going to get like these such better looks in Phoenix. He'll become super efficient. Do you know what he shot last season? Because I could not believe it. He was a 51% shooter from the field. 51. What? So while we can look at it and go, oh, yeah, he had to do too much. Yeah, his efficiency dropped off in Washington. How's it getting better than 51? I don't know that it is. That's amazing to me. How did he do it? Well, he took his 2-point percentage, which had been 52, 53, 51, up to 55. But as the season went on, that did start to drop off. And you can see that on his field goal percentage. I was looking at those numbers on this graph that I've got here. If you are on YouTube, you can see it. And it's like 54%, 60%, 50%. Is this the right bloke? Is this actually Bradley Beal's numbers? I have to go double check, and it is. Look at how high those field goal percentage numbers are each week. So if we bake in, well, he's going to lose usage, but he'll gain efficiency. He might not. Those are crazy numbers. He had a true shooting of 60%. 59.3, sorry. He was 42nd in Yahoo points leagues. He was 41st in ESPN points leagues. And he was 31 in -1 category ranks. I do think that he is going to lose quite a bit in terms of efficiency. In terms of usage. He was at 29 last season. If he hit 27 this season, I think that's on the high end of outcomes. He's probably more 25, which brings him to around a 20-point scorer. But the 5.5 assists, he's had 2 seasons in the past 3 where he's averaged 6 and above. He should hit that. He might even hit 7 a game. And that sort of keeps him in the right area. And that brings us to talking about where he sat with his usage last season. Because I said he had 29 usage for the season. There were some big usage weeks. And that is going to drop off. And it rose and rose and rose as the season went on. That is going to drop off this season. But he does have the ability to supplement it with assists. And you can see even on this one, towards the end of the season, there were 24 assist weeks, some really big assist weeks. And I think that's going to become more of the norm. And assists are valuable. Beal at one point was getting drafted in the 60s for this season, which I loved the overall value of doing that. And in some spots, well, actually, he still is. Bradley Beal's going at 63 on Yahoo, 57 on Fantrax, and 67 on ESPN. And the ranks are basically the same spot. I actually think that's pretty amazing value for what Beal can do. I still think he's around the 40 to 50 mark, honestly, because I think that while he'll lose some scoring, he's probably going to gain maybe 2 assists a game. And the other thing that will swing it is does he go back from 0.9 steals to 1 or 1.2? Because his last 3 seasons, 1.3 steals, 1.2, and then 0.9, 0.9. Does that 0.9? And these are the tiniest of numbers. But it swings fantasy a lot in terms of ranking and valuation. Can you get back to 1.2? I think that there is some significant value at the moment in looking at Bradley Beal. Again, we also think that it was a real disappointing season for him. Now, he had a couple of weeks where he had some missed time, but there's a lot of really strong weeks there on that -1 graph. There's a lot of top 30, top 40 weeks. And I think that he is going to lose usage, but I think he's going to gain assists. And then it comes down to, does he get some steals back? Or does he start taking more threes? Because he didn't take enough of them. 4 attempts per game is not enough. He needs to take 7. Now, maybe that hurts his overall field goal percentage, but he needs to take more threes. And I think he will. And I think that will overall bumps his value up and help. When you lose usage, but you replace shots with 3-point shots, well, it helps to keep your points from dropping huge amounts. I do have them dropping a lot. Like, I got them dropping like 6 points a game, I think. No, that's not true, actually. I don't have him dropping 6 points a game because he only averaged 23. I've got him dropping 2 points a game down to around 21 points a game, but averaging close to 7 assists. And that will bump that number back up. One thing that, again, I'm always going to talk about is the player regression trends. Is that when you start hitting a certain age, you start to get worse. Beal is 30. And you'll notice that over the last couple of years, he's started to regress because age 29 is where things start to drop off. And he's had almost the perfect encapsulation of what a player looks like in terms of progression and regression. Getting better, still getting better, but slowing the rate, getting to the peak, and now starting to get worse. And that's where he is in his career. And it's been a pretty steady line over the last 3 years of getting worse. That's just impact. It's not just total box score stats. It's just impact on the court. Some of that you might see maybe he improves a little bit, but is age 30? Like, I don't really see him turning that back around. So we sort of know where Beal is and don't think that we're getting back to peak top 12 Beal. It's almost impossible, I think, for him to get there. But again, when we dig into those numbers from last season, I think that I was definitely surprised to see that he was as efficient as he was. And that brings us to the Basketball Index headshot plot. Did 2 things here. Playmaking talent percentile, because I think he's going to have the ball in his hands more. This is from numbers from last season. And his catch and shoot 3-point shot making percentile, because he's going to have to do more of that. I was really intrigued to see a few things here. Is that we've got, I think, these sort of guards who work as sort of point guards and sort of shooting guards, which is what Beal is going to have to do, the guys on this list. So we've got up in the top left corner, Tyrese Maxey, really strong. Catch and shoot, shot making percentile, but playmaking, well down. You got Tyler Hero in the middle there. Beal, considered way better with a playmaking talent grade. Interesting. But worse as a 3-point shooter. You've got his teammate, Devin Booker, up above, ahead of him on that list. Okay. Booker is a better catch and shoot 3-point shot maker. Beal, slightly better playmaking talent, which I was surprised at, to be honest. So just seeing, we've got Desmond Bane on that list, who actually sits at a much better 3-point shot making percentile, but similar playmaking, which I was a little surprised to see as well. So seeing Beal sit here with that really high playmaking talent grade makes me feel, again, I don't think he's going to be the point guard. I think Booker averages more assists. But understand that he's got that ability to ramp that up a little bit and maintain some value. But the key here is going to be, can he actually become a better catch and shoot 3-point shooter? Because he's behind Hero, Maxey, Booker, Bane, relatively considerably. He's still all right, 75th percentile, but these are guys that are running at 90, 85. And that's what needs to push up for Beal to really maintain. He's got a little bit of a buffer considering where his ADP and rank is to get that value back. But I think that before we completely write Beal off, and I've been pretty guilty of saying, look, the third guy's going to lose a lot. There are mechanisms for Bealo to jump back and do a few extra little things that might maintain some of his fantasy value. It's pretty boring, but I'm not really sure there's a sleeper on this team. I'm not. Like, Beal, maybe? Do you consider that a sleeper? I guess a little bit. I guess if you look at DeAndre Ayton's ESPN ADP of 95, that's a sleeper. And if Ayton was to go to Portland, I think he'd probably be a top 35 player. So maybe there's value in that. But Booker's right middle of the second round. Some might argue it's marginally too high. I'd argue that that's true, but it could also be that he jumps through that. Kevin Durant's at 11, 16 on ESPN. I think the 16 for Kevin Durant on ESPN is too low, but whatever. Then everyone else is like outside the top 200, as they rightfully should be. So there's no real sleepers there, I don't think. Before we look at busts, and I'll give you a quick spoiler alert, I'm not sure there's any of those either. The Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl, the question you got to answer to get into the Phoenix Suns division is, what is the question I'm going to ask you today? How old's Kevin Durant? There you go. How old is Kevin Durant? The answer is he just turned 35, so all you got to write is 35. 35 is the answer. How old is Kevin Durant? Again, I don't think there's a real fantasy bust on this team. I think everyone is positioned at about the right spot. Back end of first round for Durant, sure. Middle of second round for Booker, fine. Beal in round 5 or 6, pretty good. Ayton, maybe you'd say Ayton with an ADP of 54 is maybe a little bit too high. Maybe. But if he goes to Portland, it's actually better than that. So I don't see it. And then no one else is ranked highly. All of these other spuds coming off the bench aren't in that position. Maybe you could argue that having Bol ranked at 143 is wishful thinking. Or his ADP at 138 on Yahoo is wishful thinking. And it is. But it's also your second last round or your last round pick. So who cares? Make the pick. If you believe in it, we can have differing opinions. Do it. And then when it doesn't work out, or if it doesn't work out, you move on. It's also a team that there's no current injuries on this team. Yeah, Beal missed the end of last season. It's a fake injury. Chris Paul was injured, but he's fine now. Booker had a bit of an issue at one point in the playoffs, but it's fine. They go into this season, knock on wood, injury-free, which, of course, we love. So who can get traded? It seems obvious that they are looking to trade Deandre Ayton. If they do trade Deandre Ayton, because what is he going to do? Like, as a fourth offensive option, he might struggle. And maybe, I guess, if we talk about busts, you could consider him around that area. If he's going in round 5 and he stays on this team, I don't really want anything to do with that. But it doesn't mean that he's necessarily a huge bust. But if he's dealt, big opportunity. They need to bring back shooting, and they need to bring back defense. I'm not sure that Yusuf Nurkic is the answer to that, but they do need to bring back some defense. It'd be very interesting to see what happens if they do deal Ayton. Would they feel comfortable not getting a centre back? And would they try Drew Eubanks as the starter? Because if Drew Eubanks starts, well, he is absolutely a fantasy option. Absolutely. And even if Nurkic does come over, he has had a lot of injury problems. And if you're in a deep league, weekly, or a roto with stashability, Eubanks becomes a stashable player. He absolutely does. So just watch that one with that Ayton situation. If a trade does go down, I will do a separate show on it. In terms of contract years, they've got so many players with player options, but the pattern that I've been running through these shows, if you've got a player option, I'm not going to include you in the contract year discussion here. Otherwise, the screen would get too full. So at the moment, it's only Bol and Metu who are unrestricted free agents, and this doesn't influence any of their production. What's the big rotation risk? It's Eric Gordon, I think. And I say that, like, what is Eric Gordon's rotation? I think he comes off the bench, but I think he closes. But does that mean 26 minutes, or does he play 32 starters minutes? Because 32 minutes for Eric Gordon, like, he's ranked fairly low. Like, he's ranked right down there in terms of, where is he, 221 on ESPN. Fantrax ADP of 418, which is foolish. I don't know what's going on there. Yahoo's got him ranked at 171, which is probably too high. But if you're in a 16-teamer, he's really solid because one of those guys gets hurt, Beal, Booker, Durant. Gordon probably starts. Minutes go up. He's not going to blow you away. But when you're in a deeper league, if you've got a guy that can come in and be a top 130 player for periods of time or sitting around the 180 mark otherwise, that's fine. But if they don't give him those minutes, then there's minutes to go around too on a Kogi or a Bates Diop or a Lee or the other Lee or Saban Lee. I think that's probably the major risk there. The two permanent monsters we want to watch are Drew Eubanks, in case that Ayton trade, and Jordan Goodwin, who showed a real propensity to put up defensive stats in Washington. He is a second-year player, but he's old. He's about to turn 25. I don't see him playing a sizable role first up here. Maybe 20 minutes a night. I know you'll say he's their only point guard. That's cool. They don't think they need a point guard, and I understand that. And just because he is their only point guard doesn't mean that he plays 25 off the bench. Maybe it's 19, maybe it's not. But if we go through it, right? So they've got their four starters. We know those guys are going to play. Bates, Diop, and Okogie are going to play. That's 6 guys. I would say Eric Gordon is 7. Watanabe is 8. Those guys are all going to play. I would say that Damian Lee is probably going to play. That's 9. And I haven't mentioned Goodwin, and I haven't mentioned Bol. So one of those guys probably isn't going to play each night. Unless you argue with some of those other ones there. Maybe Damian Lee doesn't play, but he's an elite shooter. All right, and he is someone who's got at least some sort of institutional knowledge of playing with Booker as well, and Ayton. So Goodwin might have this big role, and if Booker goes down, maybe he just slots in and starts. And that would be awesome to use for fantasy. But I think there's also a risk that he's the 10th man, let's say 9th at best, considering those other guys are probably going to get prioritized over him. Their depth chart. Booker and Beal will start as the guards, and then backups are Goodwin and Saben Lee. Saben Lee, pretty good defensive guard, but he doesn't do too much more apart from that. And he's only on a two-way. I don't think they're going to actually... I'm not counting Beal as a wing or Booker. I think they're more guards than wings. So I don't think they're going to start an actual wing. And then their backup wings there are Eric Gordon, Damian Lee, and Josh Okogie. Even if Okogie starts, I don't think he's worth a 12-team league pick. I've already said I think Booker's a great second rounder. Back onto that one. And Gordon's a deeper league player. In terms of forwards, I haven't gone into Kevin Durant very much here. I think he's fine at the end of the first round. Not a problem with taking him there. There's obviously plenty of risk with the knee injuries, the lower body injuries, but he's still Kevin Durant. He is going to lose a little bit in terms of usage with Beal coming across, but I don't think it's going to be significant. And I do think that he is fine to take, but it is, again, that is an element of risk that you've got to be willing to wear. And then Bates Diop is who I think will start, but I can't be convinced on that, and I wouldn't draft him in 12s if he starts anyway. Backing them up is Yuta Watanabe, Ish Wainwright, and second-round pick Tamani Kamara, who I think Kamara is going to be able to develop into... Well, I like the guy who might be ahead of him in Keita Bates-Diop. That sort of a player in a few years' time. A bit of a passer, maybe some shooting, some really good defense. Good connector, good player. And the bigs, it is Ayton, and then his backup is Eubanks, who would be very, very good if he started. Bol is another backup there, Chimezi Metu, and two-way legend Udoka Azubuike. In terms of the Durant and Bazemore rankings, well, Durant doesn't actually change Durant all that much. But it does drop Booker down slightly, which I was curious at. And it bumps Eubanks up. They're probably the two biggest impact players. And that is for Bazemore when we're talking dynasty values. It has Booker as a top 20 player. It has Durant outside the top 50 because of his age. Now, if you are, again, looking to win in the next 2 years, you bump him way up. But age, injury risk, Durant's way down. It's got Ayton inside the top 100. But I reckon that would change pretty quickly if he moved to a new team. And Jordan Goodwin's the other one of note there, who's inside the top 175, even though he is already 25. And that was a very short show because there's just so little to talk about with so many guys on this team and so many unknowns. Follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. Thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
We're just innocent men.